Great stuff. So good morning, everybody. I hope everyone can hear myself okay at the moment. So I'd like to welcome you and say good morning to everyone on behalf of myself, Kevin, who I'll introduce shortly, DAA and AvePoint, to this webinar, which is being recorded around Office 365 Backup and Restore. Beyond the native capabilities of what you have in Office 365, and we're going to discuss those, and then a little bit about Cloud Backup, why you may use it, and what the benefits may be. So I'm just going to do a quick couple of introductions now, guys. But before I say that, we do have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions, please type them into the chat window as you're going along, or if you want to store them up to the end, no problem. And then we're going to do a quick Q&A at the end for as many questions as you guys might have about the content or about any of the topics that we're covering over the course of the next hour or so. Let me just do a quick couple of introductions to everybody. So let me introduce Kevin. Kevin, if you'd like to introduce yourself, probably be easier.
Sure, thanks Dan. Hello everyone, so my name is Kevin Ryan. I'm the IT operations team lead based here in Dublin for the DAA. A little bit about myself, so I have around about 17 years experience in IT. I started off as a developer, believe it or not, and then I moved quickly into the infrastructure world. I specialized in Microsoft exclusively over the last 10 years. In the past, I've worked as a service provider, and now I'm a customer. So I have an appreciation for both sides of the fence, which I think is useful. I have 4 years experience in Office 365 and 5 years in my current role. And the summary of my current role would be people management, technical lead, solution architecture of Microsoft infrastructure, with the overall responsibility for support, team delivery, and process ownership and contribution.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Kevin. And good morning to everybody. My name is Dan Paul. I'm a solution architect for AvePoint. So I'm responsible for talking about our products, hopefully making them more understood to anyone who has maybe some questions or wants to know some additional technical information. I am about 18 years in infrastructure. I originally came way back when from the support structure. So I've been a service desk guy, a desktop guy, an infrastructure lead. I've been working with Office 365 for about 7 years now, since the good old days of BPOS. Migrated about 150,000 plus seats to Office 365 over that 7 years. But my background in infrastructure is very much in on-premise hardware and Exchange. And I've migrated and worked with a lot of businesses who've moved from Exchange into Exchange Online. I've worked in that process, and then obviously alongside that, picked up all of the other elements of Office 365. This is my email here. You guys will all get a copy of these slides at some point, either today or during the course of the week from the AvePoint marketing team. So please feel free to just focus on the slide decks, and we'll give you a copy of them at a later point in time. So let me introduce AvePoint really quickly. Who are we? So we focus in the 3 areas in the bottom left-hand corner in the screen: the migrate, the manage, and the govern, or the protect. And these are our 3 key tenets when it comes to AvePoint. We help users migrate to the cloud, usually Office 365. So how do you get there? How do you get your data there in a good quality way? What different elements or processes would you have to get to Office 365 from various different on-premise and other cloud-based environments? So we migrate people from SharePoint, from Exchange, from Box, from Dropbox, and from a lot of different other areas like HP Trim and Google. We are a large business, so we're quite used to doing that globally. And we also then focus in the manage. So when you move to Office 365, how do you manage your environment there? So understanding the process through governance, through recertification of environments, and be able to control your environment in Office 365. And then the govern and the protect. once you're in Office 365, how do you best manage that, and how do you best consider your usage of it from a security standpoint? We are 5-time Partner of the Year award winners. There are a couple of them on the screen there. We are closer to 7 million cloud users now, over 16,000 customers globally. And the point from our AvePoint is very much an indication of our relationship with SharePoint, going back nearly as long as the SharePoint product. In fact, we go back as far as the product prior to it being called SharePoint, when it was originally called Project Tahoe. So we have a very good relationship with that product. We do much more broader things now, but that is our in a nutshell.
So who are DAA? DAA, as you can see, is a global airports and travel retail group, and we have businesses across 13 countries. We're actually owned by the Irish state and headquartered here at Dublin Airport. In terms of what we do, we manage Dublin and Cork airports, and we have overseas operations and investments in countries like Cyprus, Germany, and Saudi Arabia. We have a travel retail subsidiary, and they're called ARI, and they have outlets in Europe, North America, the Middle East, India, and Asia Pacific. We also provide international aviation advisory services. So some stats from 2018, just on the bottom of the slide: with turnover of 897 million, flights to 195 destinations across 42 countries from Dublin Airport. Our passenger count for Dublin and Cork Airport combined was 33.9 million for 2018. We're growing, so we expect these figures will be on the rise for 2019.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Kevin. So I think we're going to start with start at the beginning, so to speak. We're going to start talking about cloud backup and why you would back up the Office 365 with the most pertinent question that we at AvePoint get from our customers and from our colleagues and vendors and partners alike, which is, why would you back up the cloud? What is the purpose of a cloud backup? And I'm going to talk about it in these 3 primary areas that you can see on screen. There are some additional reasons behind this and some additional questions that we get quite regularly, but these are the 3 primary ones. And so we want to talk about these in the first case. So, is this the responsibility of my cloud provider? This is obviously a question that we get quite regularly. We've moved to Office 365 now. This is all in the realm of our cloud provider. We don't need to be concerned about this anymore. Do I really need a backup? Is this really pertinent? Is this something that we really need to do anymore? And am I not covered by unlimited hold, which is a question that we get quite regularly. So let me break these down into the kind of 3 areas and talk about them individually. So let's talk about responsibility. So there's a very different way of looking at this when you really break down the ownership of what is and isn't in the Office 365 environment. Microsoft are very much designed to cover their customers, and they do a really great job of it. For any kinds of outages or loss. So loss of service due to due to hardware or infrastructure failure is absolutely something within Microsoft's purview, as is loss of service due to natural disaster or data center outage, any short-term errors, so anything that could be deleted and needs to be returned in a short-term restoration window, so stuff like the recycle bin and version history, and short-term administrative errors, so a soft delete if you've deleted a whole group or an entire group of mailboxes or something like that, the ability to roll that content back. So very much they're focused in the loss of service here, as you can see. However, when it comes to data, that data is actually primarily responsible by the customers. So loss of data, such as from a departing employee, you've deleted or disabled an account in Office 365 from your on-premise environment, it's synchronized, and now the data has been deleted because disabled or non-synced objects remove the data behind them. Loss of data, such as malicious insiders, hacktivists, for example, loss of data due to malware or ransomware, application deletion. We're going to talk about these in a bit more detail shortly, or accidental deletion. So this comes from a Forrester report, independent report from 2017, and it very much kind of demonstrates that from an application operating system, virtualization, hardware, and network level, you are covered by Microsoft. They have a very strong uptime, as we all know, and that's absolutely something that you can rely on. However, when it comes to the actual data, and the ownership of that data. This is still owned by our customers, or is still owned by the customers of Microsoft. They do not take ownership for specific data. So you can see there's a very big differential here, and the responsibility is still on the owner, the customer of the product, to rely on how they're going to manage that data, and then potentially how they're going to restore any content if it goes missing or gets deleted. So here's the second question, do I really need a backup? And I suppose there are a couple of ways to talk about the do I really need a backup. Firstly, is data really ever going to get deleted? Am I really ever going to face a scenario where I need a backup? We all know today on premises, when you have an environment, you are backing that environment up. I would imagine that most businesses who moved to Office 365 from something like Exchange was absolutely backing up that Exchange environment on premise. So the question is often asked to us, and we often ask the question back, that if you were backing it up on premise, why would you not consider that backup relevant once you've moved to Office 365? The data is still relevant. The way the users are using the data is often still the same. Can you actually lose data? Absolutely, you can. Accidental deletion is a one that we see quite regularly. End user delete something, they delete a folder from a mailbox, or they delete a file from SharePoint or from OneDrive, and they don't even notice for months. And they come to you when we were working on premise, you absolutely knew this was the case. They would come to you and say, we've lost a file, or this email is missing from my mailbox, and it's from years ago or months ago, beyond the standard retention periods that are available in Office 365. So accidental deletion, users deleted something, they've forgotten all about it, they've only realized subsequently. Malware and ransomware, this is an extremely important area now. Semantics state this is the #1 cyber threat to organizations. Malware and ransomware, it's becoming more and more quote unquote popular for hackers and crackers in the data environment. It absolutely is possible that you can get some infections. As we've seen in the recent years, the NHS were infected with a ransomware environment over their environment. So this is possible, and it absolutely could affect you. And that may be access to your data, or it may be just a complete corruption of your data. Malicious users. Yes, this happens. This has been happening in technology for many, many years, but it's even more prevalent now as many businesses are merging and acquiring competitors or other people in their market. As people are consolidating job roles and stuff like that, it is feasible for people to delete data. So malicious users still do exist. This is not a new scenario. What is maybe a newer scenario is application sync overwrite. So more than ever before, synchronization of data in Office 365 between applications, not just in Office 365, but other applications, has been more and more popular. So it is feasible for an application to make changes to data in your Office 365 environment and accidentally sync overwrite content that you wanted to keep, or that the end users wanted to keep. So these are 4 examples. There are others, but these are 4 examples of the reason why data loss can happen. If it can happen, then you really do need to consider whether you are covered for that, and then whether you have a relevant backup. And then finally, I think this is the question that I probably hear the most, and it's a very specific differential which I'm going to speak about. Am I not configured, or am I not covered by unlimited hold? There is a broad definition of unlimited hold, and understanding the difference between what is retention and hold and what is backup and restore. And the way that I discuss this with AvePoint customers is to discuss this from the premise of what you were doing on premise with your environment. And I'm going to show you 4 simple user cases really quickly now about the difference between retention and hold and backup and restore. But let's break it down into a nutshell really quickly. Retention and hold is designed for legal requirements. That's the reason why it's called legal hold in the Office 365 environment. So retention and hold is a requirement to retain data in order to be able to provide that data to a compliance officer, for a legal reason, for your regulator, for example, if you work in a regulated environment or industry. So retention and hold is designed to retain data. It is less designed to be able to provide that data back to the end user in what we would call the restore element. Backup and restore is very different. Backup and restore is designed to take a copy of it and be able to specifically restore that content back. There is no benefit to a backup if you cannot do a proper restoration. So here are 4 simple use cases, and let's just talk about the differentials as to what you would have got on premise with your backup and restore and what is available in Office 365. We'll use the logic that you've moved from an on-premise environment where you were providing the service to your end users. Now you've moved to Office 365. Can you replicate that same service? So the user wants a mailbox folder that it deleted over 30 days ago. Anyone who's worked in an Exchange admin role or a service desk role or any kind of support role has probably faced something similar to this. It might be an individual email. It's there are 20 emails in my folder, but there should be 40. Very similar statements to that. User wants a mailbox that they deleted over 30 days ago. So what would you have done on premise to be able to solve this problem? You would find out what date that data was likely to be available from the end user. You would go to tape or go to SAN storage. You would recover the relevant area in your backup. You would mount the database. You would find the mailbox. You would export that specific piece of data, and you would provide it to the user, or you would copy it directly into their mailbox or provide it to them in a PST. So that's the kind of way that you would work on this if you came from, say, an Exchange environment. And I am using Exchange and SharePoint on-premise as a basis for this, these 4 case studies really quickly. What can you do with the same scenario in Office 365? So there are no restoration of folders in Office 365 from Exchange Online. So the way that this is solved, or the way that this is provided from a retention and hold perspective, is the data is searchable in eDiscovery. So you would give the end user access to their eDiscovery portal, and the end user can go looking for the data that they've lost. There is obviously some challenges there. If there was a large client folder that potentially the end user lost, do they know all of the people that had potentially emailed them about that client over the period of time that they may have had that client? Do they know the dates and times of that? This is kind of information that is pertinent when you're looking for data in eDiscovery. So sometimes the end user will not have the information to be able to find the data. An external legal request for a copy of a user's mailbox from a specific date. This is something I faced as an Exchange administrator myself on more than one occasion. I've often had legal representatives sit and watch me restore a mailbox for a specific legal case. So can you restore a user's mailbox back when you were on premise? Absolutely, same principle. Go and get the data from SAN storage or from tape. Restore the database, mount the database, restore the database, and then find the individual mailbox and restore that mailbox to a PST file, which you then copy maybe to some removable hardware or make available to whomever needs it, be it an internal compliance person or an external legal person. So that's really simple. That's something that we used to do in the on-premise environment quite regularly. It has a simple process. You cannot do this in Office 365. There is no whole mailbox export available, and there is no point in time recovery either. So even if you could be able to restore an entire mailbox, you definitely couldn't go back to a previous date in time and restore the mailbox in that way. So again, you could provide eDiscovery to an external party or to an internal compliance person for a specific user, and that person would be able to see all of the emails inbound and outbound from that user. There are some potential security challenges there. Are you providing too much information, too much data? It's much more controllable to say this is our user's mailbox from the 12th of September, rather than provide discovery where you may provide data from the 13th of September, which you may not ordinarily plan to do. A request for a restoration of data from a site collection. So what would you do on premise? You would import that site collection from your tape or your storage backup to a new site collection, and maybe just give the users access to that data and allow them to pick through what they need. So that's a really simple process that probably followed for many years in SharePoint. you would need to restore specific elements of that site collection in Office 365 individually. So if the user has lost a list or a library or specific elements of the site collection, you would need to be able to go back and restore each one of those elements. It's also a destructive restore, so you'll be restoring over the content that you already have. And then finally, ransomware. Ransomware infects the site collection. This is, potentially similar to the scenario that we spoke about in public sector in the UK. So ransomware infects the site collection. Principle is the same on premise. You would import that site collection from a tape or storage backup, and import that into a temp site, and then specifically go and find the individual files or data that is being ransomware and copy that back over into the end user's environment. So replace the infected data essentially. In Office 365, there are no restorations available. It's all destructive restore firstly, but if you wanted to do individual files, at best you're looking at versioning. So you can go back and look at a previous version of that file, but if the user is looking at a file and they haven't made changes to it at all, maybe they just copied it in from their workstation in OneDrive and didn't make any changes to it, potentially that file is lost to you if it gets ransomware and you don't have a backup and you don't have any version history. So here are 4 simple examples of the differentials between what you have on the right-hand side natively, which is max retention, max hold and versioning, versus what is traditionally backup and restore on-premise. I'm using the example of on-premise because the narrative here is if you were backing it up on-premise, you should be considering backing this up in Office 365. So hopefully that made sense. If you have any questions in this area, again, please feel free to type them into the chat and we'll discuss them at the end. So I'll pass over to Kevin now and talk about DAA.
Thanks, Dan. Before I go into why we went with Office 365 Backup, or more specifically, why we went with AvePoint Backup, I want to give people a little bit of understanding about our Office 365 environment, because I think personally that helps people relate to the real world, if you like. So our team is responsible for designing, implementing, supporting end user computing. Now that's the old way of saying modern workplace. So what that means to us is a combination of Windows 10, Microsoft Intune to manage our mobile devices, Office 365 and all the services that comes with that, and then Azure AD. So Azure AD comes a plethora of functionality that brings that all together and presents the user with our modern workplace. So how we get there is we work with our various stakeholders, and that would be IT service delivery, IT business champions, senior IT management, and IT security. And we work together to design our product. And the result is functionality, look and feel, user experience, while wrapping around security and compliance. So that's our modern workplace. It really has changed the game for us in recent years, as I'm sure it has for a lot of you, because it offers our users a lot more than we used to be able to, and especially in mobility. And it's not static, it's constantly changing and improving. So it's a new challenge for us in IT. So some more specifics around our Office 365 environment. So we have approximately 4,000 users, and they run across approximately 2,500 PCs and approximately 3,500 mobile devices. Now, interestingly, a large portion of those mobile devices are BYOD. And we've seen a huge uptake in this since introducing Office 365 as the user gets more in return. We have 2 identified user profiles within the business, various different terminology for these profiles, but I'm using knowledge workers and kiosk workers. Knowledge workers being productivity workers, dedicated workstations, high productivity in terms of IT. Kiosk workers is your frontline staff or your frontline worker. Our ratio is approximately 60 to 40 knowledge workers to kiosk workers. We have many different roles that fit into these profiles across the business, and some of these are very mobile. So mobility is key, as I mentioned already. So as you can imagine, in an airport, we have airport operations, security, maintenance, it's large campuses. It's vital that these people have access to IT services on the go. And whether that be access to SharePoint Online for standard operating procedure, or general collaboration between 24/7 teams to ensure continuity without always having to check back to base. Communication is big for us, especially between staff and also between the company and staff and vice versa. It can be challenging in a business that is varied as ours. So Office 365 helps us there. So obviously we have mobile access to email. Nothing new, I guess, it's been around a long time. But what Office 365 offers us is that enriched experience. So integration from OneDrive for Business on the go. So that was a big change for us. Yammer is big for communications. A lot of sections of the business love this. Um, Very different from the other services I already mentioned, because IT would support everything in terms of Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, instruction, and so on. With Yammer, we support the periphery, so we support access. How do you get to it? The business own everything beyond that, and that's the way it should be. So they own the content, they own the groups, they know what it looks like. In terms of how we got to Office 365, we began our journey about 4 years ago. So like most people, we started with Exchange Online. Then we looked at SharePoint Online while looking at OneDrive for Business and rolling out Office Pro Plus. In conjunction with that, we retired our old MDM solution, so our mobile device management solution, and introduced Microsoft Intune. As I said, we also have Yammer. In terms of how we adopt technology as a business, I would say we're quite conservative in regards to new or disruptive technology. And this would be very typical, I find, of companies that predate the technology that they now wholly depend upon. For us, it's mainly driven by our partners who help deliver our mission critical systems. These are very bespoke systems, very critical. Only a few companies in the world will develop them. So to them, the less change, the better. And that's understandably so. So what happens with that is that can permeate through some of the sections of the business. So that translates to what we would call a careful approach to Office 365. While we heavily use the core services, we have in fact disabled some of the more advanced services, quote unquote. So what I would say in that is Teams, Office 365 Groups, Planner, Sway. And the reason we took that decision was to really focus our support and adoption across the core services, because our users' technical ability would vary widely across the business. So we need to find a commonality there. In saying that, we have a group, as I mentioned already, called IT Business Champions. So these are non-IT people that are out in the business, that are technical, interest in technology. We give them access to those services like Teams, for example. They use them whatever way they see fit. In return, they feed back to us, and they give us the learning to help develop our product. So what works for them, what doesn't work, more importantly. So that's how we interact with our businesses. So in terms of Teams, we have a roadmap for Teams. So we plan to move. Currently, we've Skype for Business server on premise, and we'll work with our IT business champions and other stakeholders, and we'll have to refine and design our products. So we're probably looking right now at an 18-month timeframe for that. IT security is obviously a very hot topic these days. So all the services that I spoke about already, we need to protect that. We need to protect our data, protect our users, and so on. So Azure AD offers a plethora of functionality, such as multi-factor authentication, Azure information protection, conditional access, very, very powerful. We use all of these things. So all of that is our modern workplace. Thanks, Dan. So now that I've described our environment, well, why back it up? So first and foremost, I think Dan explained this very well, is the realization that you have to back that data up. Microsoft provide us with a very good product, highly resilient, excellent service, but the data is your responsibility and you need to back it up. And Microsoft are very clear about that. So that's a very, very easy to understand requirement. Apart from that, we had other requirements, and we split them into two buckets. One was IT operations, and the other was IT security and compliance. So from an operational point of view, we needed to ensure that we could back up all the Office 365 workloads. We needed to ensure that we maintained our data retention policy that applied to that type of data, which in our case is 2 years. We need to ensure that we had granular restoration capabilities, which Office 365 does not offer. And of course, we had to protect ourselves against accidental deletion or sometimes intentional deletion. And as Dan said, that can form part as a malicious user, which is common within IT these days. So moving on to IT security and compliance. This was an interesting topic for us. So before we moved to Office 365, we decided to form an exit strategy. And that was based on external consultancy advice from partners such as Gartner. And internally, we had a discussion and agreement with our IT security and compliance team that we needed an exit strategy. So what does that mean? So in a highly, highly unlikely event that we decide to move away from Office 365, how do we do that? So I'm not talking about a procedure or a step-by-step, it's more of a strategy, what we do next. So to support that strategy, we needed an independent location for our data. So we have data in Office 365. Microsoft will provide us with that data if we ever decide to move. As I said, very unlikely. But we needed an option B. AvePoint gives us that. So AvePoint gives us an independent location for our data that we can secure from them if and when required. So this was key for us and very important before we moved to Office 365. Of course, if you don't have an exit strategy, there's nothing preventing you developing one while you're in Office 365. It's not a massive undertaking. It's just about options and what you do next, if and when. Another key thing for us was around ransomware. Dan already spoke about some examples. We have some examples here in Ireland and across Europe. It's a very important protection against an all too familiar threat that exists today. Many recent examples of high-profile victims of this issue, and some having to pay at ransoms as they had no choice. So we don't want to be on that list. And to protect yourself, the only way to have full protection against that is to invest in a third-party backup solution, and such as AvePoint. Now, other IT security requirements which we had, which was key for us, these things we're looking at on the slide, if they weren't delivered, we couldn't go with that product, in this case, AvePoint. So encryption of data, that means two things to us. So during transmission, ensure it's encrypted, and at rest, so it's sitting in a data center, how is it encrypted? Another one was access, so multi-factor authentication for privileged users or administrators. These are necessary accounts, but they could be highly destructive if not controlled in the right fashion. So MFA does that, it controls that for us. Another important aspect was industry standard security. So AvePoint are certified in ISO, which is key for us. The final point was digital shredding, as we would call it. So if data is deleted, how do we ensure it's really deleted? And that's obviously a requirement for GDPR, which we are regulated under. So I just thought about how I could compare AvePoint to something else. So we're a traditional Microsoft infrastructure team. We run backup as a service across our internal teams and so on. We have one other major backup solution that we use on premise. Some stats about that we can see on the slide. So it's approximately 80 terabyte of data spread across approximately 20 servers, 4 separate SANs, and this is due to data separation requirements that we have. Of course, if you have that environment, you've lots of dependencies. So physical servers, virtual servers, multiple fiber and Ethernet networks, you have operational maintenance requirements. It's a complex environment, but it needs to be for what we back up. And it requires a deep understanding of that product and environment and infrastructure. So it's a very stable environment, but needs lots of love and attention from highly skilled engineers like any other on-prem solution. So if we compare that to AvePoint, it's a different story. So we're worlds apart here. Of course, the target is very different, and it's in comparison of a SaaS solution to an on-prem solution. But AvePoint to us is very, very flexible. Scaling out, expanding storage takes minimum effort. If we compare that to our on-prem solution, it's a different proposition. So we're talking about new servers potentially, SANs, network configuration across multiple teams. So, a number of weeks really to make that happen. The skill level that's required isn't as high. And plus, one major bonus for us is patching. So you talk to your operation teams about patching. It's a major thorn. It obviously is necessary, but AvePoint takes that away for us.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Kevin. And again, just to remind everybody, questions, please type the questions into the chat. We will absolutely have a Q&A at the end where we can talk not just to myself about Cloud Backup or about the AvePoint product, but certainly you can ask Kevin some questions about his experiences or using the product, but also with his reasoning behind moving to a third-party backup solution. I'd also really like to kind of reiterate the exit strategy slide that Kevin spoke about previously. It's very, very rare for us to find businesses who have taken that amount of time and thought into their process to move to Office 365. If we were doing any of this kind of work on premise, we would absolutely be having these conversations, but in the cloud, for some reason, sometimes these disappear, or there's a level of reliance or expectation with cloud services that we ordinarily wouldn't have as technologists when it comes to on-premise, as an example, or if we were moving to any kind of application. So the exit strategy is one that I really liked, and I thought it was a very, very intelligent way of DAA making their decisions when it came to providing services. So I'm just going to talk to you guys now about AvePoint Cloud Backup, the product that Kevin was referring to in the last couple of slides. I actually talk to you about the product and how it works, and I'm going to give you a little, maybe 5-10 minute demo of the product and show you how it works, so you can see it visually from a UI standpoint. So firstly, let me introduce the product and what is it, what does it do for you guys. So we have unlimited automated backup for your Microsoft Cloud assets. So we support SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, Exchange Online, Project Online, Groups, and most importantly nowadays, certainly Teams. So we can back up these environments up to 4 times a day. We also have an option to back up Dynamics in the Office 365 environment. We have an unlimited option for storage and retention, which gives you guys the flexibility to protect content as your organizational needs dictate. We do granular restore in or out of place, so we can allow you to search for content and then restore that content either to the original location or to alternate locations, and I'm going to demonstrate that a little bit in the future. If you want to, you can even export some of that content out. And then we give you the visibility over that. So not only do we give you visibility about what you're backing up in our environment, so how much data you're backing up, and even we have some predicted historical graphs, so you could look at what your backup looks like today, what it looked like a year ago, and potentially what it may look like in the future in terms of how much data you're backing up. We give everything in a nice, simple, one-place dashboard. We allow you to back up multiple tenants into the same environment without having to log in and out with different accounts. You can back up multiple environments. And this is all available in a single dashboard. You can bring your own storage. You can use Azure storage from AvePoint. You can bring your own keys, or you can use security keys from AvePoint. You retain complete control over that content. We don't have any access to the individual data. Our cloud backup services are based upon something we call AvePoint Online Services. So to explain this, or to provide a very simple analogy, think of AvePoint Online Services as the Azure to Office 365. This is the platform on which all AvePoint products are built. And it's a really simple basic line platform for all of our products to be able to be configured and allow our customers to be able to pick up additional products from AvePoint without having to go and reconfigure their environments. Once you configure AvePoint Online Services to connect to your Office 365 environment, then any products you pick up subsequently will automatically retain and pick up that particular connection. There are lots of obvious benefits with our AvePoint Online Services. We have better service, so we can provide service level agreements and availability and scalability. We are based in the Office 365 data centers, the same data centers that Office 365 in. So from a latency standpoint, when it comes to something like backup, we have very, very good speed. We have higher operational efficiency. You guys don't need to install anything, upgrade or maintain, as Kevin pointed out. No more patching of servers, which I can certainly empathize with him over the years of my infrastructure job. And dynamic resource availability. As your environment expands, as you put more data in, we can ramp out our resources to accommodate our customers. And finally, better security. Our AvePoint Online Services environment is built upon Azure storage. We are in Azure data centers, and in order for us to be in those data centers, we have to provide a certain level of security to even be able to provide those services. This is our global cloud footprint. So as you can see, these data centers are probably quite familiar to you guys if you've been working with Microsoft for a while. These are the primary data centers for Microsoft, and we are inside each one of them. So we have hosting and a cloud backup solution available in each of these data centers. We manage about 12 petabytes of data for customers worldwide. We are backed by the Azure 99.5% availability. We have 24/7 support, which is independent, so that's our support teams. And you can see a couple of items there are insider release. We have data centers that are specific to our insider release programs as well. So if you wanted to see internal changes or functionality as we do release cycles of our products, you can sign up some tenants to the three data centers that you can see on the screen, and you'll get an insider release footprint as well. So here is the cloud backup portal. This is how our product looks, and I'm just going to quickly flick now over to cloud backup so you guys can see it. So here we have AvePoint Online Services. Hopefully you guys can all still see my screen. Just going to check in one of the chat windows to make sure you guys can see my screen. I think you can. Good stuff. So AvePoint Online Services, this is the configuration platform for all of our products. You can see it's a very simple waffle design on the right hand side with the navigation there on the left. So AvePoint Online Services is the place where you're going to configure and pick up any of our products. If you then click on Cloud Backup, what you receive is the Cloud Backup portal. And as you can see, we have all of the workflows available individually for backup and restore. So we have Exchange Online, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint Online, and Groups. And then underneath it, Teams, Project Online, we have backup public folders, and we have 2 Dynamics options to backup Dynamics 365 as well. What you can see in the middle of the screen is a simple status screen for the last 4 backups for any one of these individual products. So here you can see Exchange Online. Within Exchange Online, you can see each one of the last 4 backups. You can see the details of those backups. If you click on it, it takes you to the job monitor for that particular area. You can see what's backed up, and you can click on a little button over here to export. If you wanted to export this for your own internal records, or for maybe an audit trail to prove that you're doing a relevant backup, or if you wanted to look at the items that failed or skipped, you could see those in this particular window view right here. Configuration of the product is really simple. We have 2 kind of primary configuration pools. You can change the scope of your backup, so you can decide which elements you're backing up in Office 365. You can see this is Exchange Online, and you can see now I am backing up multiple tenants. So these are some of my colleagues in our demo environment. This is, you can see a DBN tenant. We have an AvePoint France tenant, so this is a totally different tenant. And over here we have a UK tenant, that's myself, you can see. So these are 3 separate tenants, all available in this one view, in this one part of Office 365. And you can turn backup on and off through a simple toggle. So as you can see, we have multiple workflows. You can toggle each one of those on and off, so you don't need to back up everything in Office 365 from day one. You can decide what elements you want to start backing up. And the other one is the frequency. We offer up to 4 backups per day, and they're really simple to configure as well. You choose the first job time, and then you select how many jobs you want, and they'll either run on a 24, a 12, an 8, or a 6-hour schedule. Very simple. Once you've configured those 2 things, so what part of your tenancy you want to back up and how regularly you want to back them up, and once you've turned it on, you are ready to go. Let's be honest though, when it comes to backup and restore, no backup tool is worth its salt if the restoration options aren't good and easy to use. So let me just take you through a really quick example of some restores, and I'm going to start with SharePoint Online because this gives you a really good example to see in place and out of place restores. So if we click on SharePoint Online, we have 2 different ways to do search for what do we want to restore. So you can type in a keyword search here. You can either choose a site specifically or type a specific word in. You have a backup time range, so a range on which you want to be able to search for content. And then you have a choice of what you want to search for. What type of level are you going to search at? If you choose document level, you then get significantly more options to type in the document name, a creation time, a creation by, a modified by, and you can even search a specific size of document as well. So greater than and equal to, or less than and equal to by megabyte, kilobyte, or gigabyte. So a nice simple search parameter there. If you choose a different level, you'll get a different set of options. But often we know that the end user has told us something specific. So I need to get back a file from a specific date. So we give you a date option as well. If you click on the little button at the bottom, this will pull all of your job windows and you can look at every single job that has run for your backups. So here we have the 4:53 a.m. job that ran this morning for SharePoint in my demo environment. If I click on it, I now get a browsable window with all of the SharePoint sites that I'm backing up. So I can scroll through them. You can see down here in the right hand corner, we have 19 window views that I can click on to take me to the specific area. But I know I'm looking for my SharePoint site. So I'm just going to type my initials up here. And this shows me the SharePoint site that I'm looking for, which is my demo site. If I click on it, it now becomes a browsable site for me to be able to look through. So right now it's going to pull all of the folders within that specific site and show them to me. So now you can see all of the folder structure within SharePoint. I'm now browsing within that. So what's the benefit here? It's a very simple one that we probably all seen before. End user tells us something's available on a specific date. The old days in Exchange, this would be even more frustrating. They would tell you that they wanted to be able to restore some content. They would tell you a date. You would find the tape or restore that content from SAN storage. You would mount the database. You would find the individual's mailbox. You would go into that mailbox. You would go into the folder, and lo and behold, the data that they thought was in that particular day isn't there, and it turns out to be a day before, or a day after, or weeks before. So that was always a frustration. Within this product, we can browse to and actually look for the data before we begin the restore job. So we can click through and look at the individual folders. Once we're inside the folder structure, we can browse into the individual files that we're looking for in order to be able to restore them. So here I have some test documents. I'm just going to click on a couple of them and I'm going to start a restore job. What options do we have in restore? Here are some of the ones that I really like as a former technologist working in this from an infrastructure standpoint. Firstly, we have the ability to restore security only. So in SharePoint or in OneDrive, sometimes the user would have access levels at SharePoint, maybe an owner level on a site, and they make some changes and that breaks some inheritance or that breaks some access rights in SharePoint. And the user comes and says, hey, these people used to be able to access this data and today they can't. we can go back to a previous point in time and restore just the security over that site collection, that site, that list, that library, or the individual document. So this is a really powerful bit of tooling that you can restore just the security permissions over the object and not change any of the data. So solve any of those security configuration changes that may have happened erroneously. My other option that I like to demonstrate down here at the bottom is the latest version versus current and previous versions. You can restore the latest version only if you're doing a restore, or you can restore a current version and previous versions and choose how many versions you want to restore. If you're restoring something that's very big, like a big site collection, and you don't want to spend ages having to restore and run that job and have the job take a long time, and you want a bit more of a predictable understanding of how long the job might take, you can choose a specific number of versions and then maybe be more granular if the users come back to you and say, hey, I need 10 versions of this specific document. This is much more control again from a configuration standpoint when it comes to being able to restore content. The other option that we have here, which is really useful, is in place and out of place restoration. So we can restore data to the original location, or you can restore data to another location. So if you click on the radio button for another location and scroll down, you get the ability to look at all of the other SharePoint sites that you have, not just in this tenant, but in other tenants too. So you can again see different tenants over here. You can see my SharePoint site over here is AvePoint UK, and you can see these already. I'm being shown the different tenant, which is our Germany tenant. If I type one of my colleagues' names in here, and again, I have a search parameter, so I don't have to go scrolling through. I can type in and I can find a site that I want to be able to restore data to. And again, I can browse into that site to look for a specific folder. So I can be more prescriptive about where I'm specifically putting that data when I want to be able to tell the end user where it's going to be. So I can scroll through the functions here, the folder structure, and I can choose a folder to do a restore. Nice and simple. What's also powerful here is because SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business Online are the same, essentially the same technology, I can even restore this SharePoint data to a OneDrive site. So what's the benefit here? There's two, vice versa. If you delete a SharePoint site, maybe you're doing some cleaning up and you want to delete your sites that are no longer being used, you delete a SharePoint site and the end users come and say, hey, we need the documents out of that specific site, or I need the documents out of that site that was deleted 60, 80, 90 days ago. Can you provide them to me? What you would ordinarily have to do is restore the entire site, but with out of place restoration, you can restore just the documents into that particular user's OneDrive, for example. You can restore it to another SharePoint document library as well if the user was using another element of SharePoint, but you can also restore it into that person's OneDrive so they have all the access. The flip side of that is someone leaves your business and you delete their data. So you delete their OneDrive site and their team come to you and say, hey, we need access to some documents that that person was working on in their OneDrive. You could browse into OneDrive to search for that content to restore, and you could restore that content from OneDrive into a SharePoint document library. That means that that person's team, for example, could get access to those documents. So in place and out of place restoration can be highly useful, and those are two good user cases. And again, I can scroll down into a specific folder here, or I can click on a specific folder and look for the particular browse to a specific OneDrive and then look to a specific folder that I want to be prescriptive about where I'm going to restore this data to. And then we have some really simple conflict error handling here. So you can skip, you can overwrite by last modified time, or append a 1 to the end. So a really simple way to do restoration. I'll quickly show you Exchange. Again, we have the same panels here. You can search at mailbox level, folder level, or mailbox item level. If you choose item level, you're going to get a lot more options. If you click on the backup job, you can look at the backup jobs. I'm going to look at the 923 job, which is just finished for Exchange. I'm going to look in my particular mailbox now. I'm going to click into a different folder where I have some test emails. And within Exchange Online, I can say, right, I'm going to restore these emails. And what restore options do I get? Again, into the original location with a conflict error of skip or overwrite. Skip and overwrite really obvious, but an overwrite's a skip's really easy. Sorry. End user comes and says, "Hey, I had 50 emails in this folder, but today there are only 22." You could go select the folder, restore the folder to the original location with the skip option on, and it will restore the missing 28 emails without having to overwrite the 22 that are already in there. The tool is going to do the work for you because you don't have to go to the end user and ask the question specifically about what emails they know they think are missing. You can pick a point in time where they know that the content was there. You can use the skip option and it will add all of the missing content to that particular folder. Again, we have out of place restore here. So restore data to another location. I can restore these emails from this mailbox into an alternate mailbox. I'm again going to browse and pick on one of my colleagues. And I now have access to his mailbox in the restore functions, and I can choose again, be more prescriptive about where I want to put that particular piece of data. So hopefully that demonstrates some really powerful and useful functionality when it comes to restore. And I'm only going to show you a couple other things in our cloud backup tool. We have some data management areas where we do a DSAR. So if you do a proper data subject access request, which is ICL 15 from the GDPR legislation, this needs to be all data that you hold for that individual, not just in your live environment, but also in your backup, any data that you hold for that individual. So we have the ability to do a discoverer for an individual user. I can type in my name here, I can find myself, I can click next, I can select myself, and I have the ability to export or recover point, and that will show me all data that is held within Cloud Backup for this particular user, me in this particular case. If I were to also get a right to be forgotten request, which is an Article 17 deletion, again, you should be deleting not only from your live environment, but also any data records that you hold for that individual from your data, from your cloud backup environment as well. So again, the principle is exactly the same. Click on right to be forgotten requests. Apologies. Here we go. Discover and delete. Type in my name. Click on my name, click next, and now I have the delete option over here. So if I select myself, I can click delete, and this will remove all data related to myself. In this particular case for Exchange Online, if I went back and did the browse here for OneDrive for Business, the principle is the same. Type in my name, click next, and you can see the OneDrive icon here. Click next, and I will have the ability to delete that data. Very quickly, what I was showing you before was here you can see again anyone who's run a job for DSAR, either a right to be forgotten deletion, you can see all of the history of these particular jobs. And this is our simple job monitor. So this is taking you directly to the job monitor with the sections already filled in. This job monitor is also useful for searching. So you can search for any of the jobs that have run over any job type, for any object type, so any type of workflow that we are backing up, and any status of those jobs in this job monitor window. And what's also good over here is we have a license consumption report, which gives you a really good overview of what you're doing here with Cloud Backup and how much data you're actually backing up. So you can see a nice simple overview. If you needed to provide this information in a report, or you had a CFO or a business owner, or you were about to have a new budget and you wanted to see where you were, you could see all of this information in a nice simple screenshot. We also have a usage folder function, which shows you not only the usage of the data that you're storing over historical times, but then we'll give you a predicted expectation of what you'll be doing with data based on the trends that you've had previously. So this is a really good overview, I think, of the product. If you would like to see more, there's some information on the deck. There are also some links in the deck that we'll provide to you, or please just contact anyone at AvePoint and we can show you some more information on this. So let me quickly flick back to the presentation, guys. I'm going to talk really quickly about a couple more functionality that we have within Office 365. Hopefully everybody can see my screen again. I'm sure I'll be getting lots of messages if I wasn't. So let's just talk about a couple other things. We have a virtual assistant within Teams, which allows end users to restore their own data. So this will allow an end user to use a bot within Teams to find some data. So this will allow empower the user to find their own data and also remove some calls from the service desk or from whatever function you use to be able to restore data for end users. So this is end user restore. The Ava tool, AvePoint Virtual Assistant tool, is available from the Teams store today. So you can install this. It's a free tool. Today, if you install it, it will look through your recycle bin. If you give it sufficient access to, it will look through your recycle bin and you can see the functionality of the tool today. So you have the ability to click on restore an email, type the search parameters in which you saw previously in the tool. The AvePoint Ava bot will respond and show you the data that you have that is available for restore. You can either click restore, you can see some more items, or you can run another search looking at different deleted emails. Once you have a cloud backup product from us, the Ava tool will not just look at your recycle bin, but it will also look at the cloud backup environment. So this will empower end users to be able to do restores for themselves. So those simple "I've lost an email" calls can be removed by using AvePoint Virtual Assistant. I've shown you the GDPR, so this is just another overview of the functionality that we have available there. And that is a tool. Again, guys, if you'd like to see this in any more detail or you'd like a demonstration for your company, please feel free to contact me or anyone else at AvePoint. I will pass over to Kevin now.
Perfect, thanks, Dan. So I've spoken about our Office 365 environment and what it looks like. I've talked about why we went with Office 365 Backup and more specifically why we went with AvePoint. Now flash forward and I'll give you an overview of what it looks like today. So we've been using AvePoint for approximately 3 years now. We back up around about 38 terabytes, and that's across the multiple workloads I've already discussed. So Exchange Online, SharePoint, OneDrive, Groups, and Teams. As I mentioned, our retention policy is 2 years for this category of data, so that's applied and it's working well. One feature of which we value very much and we've made a lot of use of is the 4 restoration points, which was new for us for this type of data. There's lots of examples where it saved our users and admins quite some time. And the thing about this is it's a visible benefit outside the team. So there's lots of really good operational and security benefits, but end user benefit, this is one of the top ones because they can see that they have been saved lots of time if, say, a document became corrupt halfway through the day. So we can restore that for them. In terms of our experience, ease of use really stands out for this product. It just works. So you've seen Dan's great demo. It looks really good. I've obviously spent a lot of time in the UI. From an operation perspective, I would be very obsessed with minimizing complexity. It frees up the team to do what they want to do or the projects that we should be working on. So it keeps them interested and engaged, keeps our stakeholders happy. So everybody wins. I was genuinely surprised of how easy it was to set this product up. We had a single onboarding call and then we're good to go. It was very impressive. I would have expected multiple calls, gradual go live, testing, so on and so forth, but very, very little configuration required. 7 days later, we had full protection across our tenant. So all data was backed up, fully protected, which wasn't really that long. The configuration, very intuitive. You saw the screen, just kind of makes sense of what you need to do. It's not difficult to understand. We had 0 problems when we configured this product and continue to this day from an operational point of view of how we monitor failures for backups and so on. So you saw some of the reports in there. So moving on to support. Now, from my experience, I've worked in the field for a few years now. I've worked with multiple vendors on both sides of the fence, as I mentioned, as a service provider and now a consumer or customer. I've worked with various sizes of companies and structures that offer different types of support for hardware, software, services, and so on and so forth. I have to say that AvePoint are probably up there with the best in my experience. We might not always admit this, but sometimes our goal is really to how do I get to the level 2 engineer as soon as possible, because they're the only ones that really understand me. They're the only ones that really can help me, but not in this case. I think that at all times we're satisfied with the level 1 engineers, the initial person that we contact in the call, that they have the knowledge, or either if they don't have the knowledge, they have quick access to that knowledge that helps us resolve the issue or just answer our question. So overall, it's a positive experience for us. It's a modern product produced by a modern company who seem to have really thought about to make our lives easier. And our lives, I mean operations and security, and while ensuring that our data is protected, which is the most important thing. So I'm just going to finish up with a couple of tips and insights. So 2 things really. I talked about a lot of stuff, but if I was to say 2 things, number 1, remember it's your responsibility to back up the data. Microsoft are very clear about this. It's just like any other system. Just think of it as like that, like it's on premise. You need to back up that data to ensure that you're compliant and so on. Second one, have a think about your exit strategy. Doesn't matter if you're in Office 365 already, it's not too late. Have a think about it. Exit strategy is about options. It's not a procedure, it's not a step-by-step migration plan, it's about what happens if. So do have a think about that.
Great, thank you very much, Kevin. So that's our presentation for today, guys. I think that's a really good overview of the product and also how DAA benefited from using it and some of the decisions that they took and the reasoning behind those decisions for using any third-party cloud backup tool. But hopefully I've demonstrated a little bit as to why I think you should use ours. So I'm going to open up the floor for questions now. Please type any questions you have into the chat window. Kevin and I will try to answer any of those questions as best we can. So I've got a question here. Why should I choose this product as I get some functionality from Microsoft? That's a great question. And hopefully I covered that in the slide that spoke specifically to the differentials between native functionality, retention and hold versus backup and restore. So hopefully that that answered your question in advance. I'm not sure what time that question was typed in. If you need any more detail on that, or if you'd like me to speak about it in any more detail, please feel free to contact me. I can speak chapter and verse to that particular conversation, having been an infrastructure guy for such a long time. So yeah, any other questions, guys, please feel free to type them into the chat window. I'll just give that page a couple of seconds to load and see if there are any more new questions. I always take it that no questions means Kevin and I did a good overview job, and so you guys don't have any questions. That's great. How long? I'll say we've got a couple more questions coming in. How long would this take to set up for a small company? Yeah, so I mean, I don't know what the definition of small company is there, but I think I can answer this no matter the size of your business. As Kevin pointed to in the last couple of slides, we have a guarantee that we will back up your entire environment, no matter how much data you're talking about, within 7 days. So we will complete a full backup of your environment within 7 days. As Kevin alluded to, our onboarding is normally 1 call. We request a certain amount of access. Obviously, the tool needs access to the environment. We will request that in advance. And then normally, once we have that access, we will book a call. It will be 1 call ordinarily. And after that configuration is complete, it might be a call in the morning. configuration is set up, and then a brief check in the afternoon to make sure that everything is running as expected. And we guarantee to back up your entire environment within 7 days. Okay, that's another question. What happens if we get a ransomware attack? Yeah, so I suppose it very much depends on what that question is. I'm going to interpret it a little bit and see if hopefully I got it right. If I haven't, please feel free to elaborate on your question. So if you get a ransomware attack and you are exposed to potentially no access to elements of your data, mostly ransomware attacks are elements of individual files that you can't get access to rather than infrastructure, then that data is available for you to restore. So let's take an example of a SharePoint site. If you have a ransomware on the SharePoint site and you can no longer access the data available in that, you can restore that entire SharePoint site to an alternate location from the last backup job, which obviously could be within, if you take the 4-job window configuration, will be within 6 hours of when you found the ransomware was infected. You can take a backup, so you can make a restoration of that content within 6 hours of that window. And put that into a different site collection, into a different location in your environment, and give your users access again. Again, remember that we restore ACLs and we restore security rights as well. So essentially, you would really just be pointing those users at a new SharePoint location, and their life would continue as expected. Hopefully that answered your question. If you have any additional, if you want me to elaborate on that further, or I haven't answered it the way that you intended it, please feel free to throw an additional question in. Can we back up Teams? Yes, absolutely, we can back up Teams. We are one of a nominal number of companies that back up Teams. And the reason why everybody is available to back up Teams currently is that we worked with the devs at Microsoft to open up the API structure and understand how they built Teams in order for us to be able to back it up. So yes, Teams is one of the workflows within Office 365 that we can back up. Thanks very much for that question. I'm just checking the window to see if there are any more questions. Okay, give it 30 seconds more and then we can close this up. I think we do have some additional questions. I think they're just loading in the window. Maybe I can see some ... someone's typing. Just gonna wait for that person to finish their thought. Okay, here's a new one. Can the AvePoint product back up public folders in Exchange? So I'm gonna just interpret that to be Exchange Online and then answer yes. So yes, we have the ability to back up public folders in Exchange Online. That is one of the workflows. There will be a presentation released, and on the workflows of the screen grab of the front page, you'll be able to see the public folder option. Also, we have a YouTube channel. When you receive the presentation, there is a link in the bottom right hand corner of that slide, which points you at the individual video for the demo we have of our Exchange Online environment, our cloud backup environment. Also, if you just search for us in YouTube, you will find an AvePoint page with a lot of our documents, our demos, our conversations, our webinars. You'll find all of that information there, and you will be able to see the Exchange public folder option. So yes, we do back up Exchange Online public folders. Yes, we do. I thought you was going to get more questions, Kevin. I thought they were going to ask you lots and lots of detail.
Yeah,
You did such a good job, my friend. That's what happened.
that must be it. That must be it.
Well, I think someone else is typing again, so there's another question. Okay, I think we have a couple more guys. Excuse me while I scroll through them. Yeah, cool. Can you? Oh, I've got even more. 1 second. That is a very long question. Okay, so I think just reading in between the lines here, this says, can you explain use of non-Azure storage for backups? Absolutely. So within the configuration of the Cloud Backup tool, we have the ability to choose a different storage location. Customers can bring their own Azure Blob storage. You can bring Amazon S3 storage, FTP storage, SFTP storage. We have a couple others. Please feel free to pop me an email if you want a definitive list. We also have that list available online. I think it's 7 specific locations or 7 specific types of storage that we have available, if I remember correctly. And it's simply a configuration option in the settings of the product. You would click in there, you would click the storage location, and then you would receive a window which would require you to put a specific location and a set of credentials in order to access that location. Once those credentials are verified, so you click on the verify button, then you will have access and all of your backups will now go into that location. I have a couple more guys, bear with me. Okay, what's this question? Okay, so a good question here. How does cloud backup work if we have several tenants but spread over different data centers? Can we still see them all in the same portal? Do they back up to their local AvePoint Cloud services in the same data center? So yes, let me answer that question in the two ways that it was asked. Yes, you can back up multiple tenants in one configuration in Cloud Backup. You do not need to use separate environments or separate configurations. I interpret this question a little bit more focused on the data center element, and so I'm going to answer that question as best I can. So, can you still see them in the same portal? Yes. However, your choice of data center, as Kevin pointed out on the slide that he had, which focused on where his data was or where the DAA data is, you need to choose the location for your AvePoint Cloud Backup data storage when you configure the tool. If you wanted to do multi-geo, we are supporting that. It's in the release, which is imminent. I believe it's even in the next few weeks, I think. We will support multi-geo, where you can split your content into different locations. We also provide different retention per workload as well. So hopefully, let me just break down this question. Do you have several tenants? Can you see them in the same portal? Yes. Will they back up to the same data center? Yes, if you choose one data center. If you choose multiple data centers, so if you do multi-geo support where you back up different elements in different areas, you can also cover that. So I hope that answered your question. Please feel free to write some more in there if that didn't answer. I hope it did. What's the next question here? We got a few more questions. Okay. How many work days the implementation project of the product backup system usually take? So I think that question is how long would it take you to onboard? I interpret that. How many work days does the implementation project of the product backup system usually? Yep. So I interpret that as how long would it take you to onboard into Office 365? It will take 7 days. We guarantee to back up your entire environment. So you will be configured and running within 7 days. So that is our a guarantee. Your entire environment will be backed up within 7 days. The configuration, as Kevin pointed out, is normally just one call. Hopefully that answered your question. Okay. If the tenant was corrupted or compromised, could we restore multiple mailboxes to a new Office 365 tenant? Yes, absolutely. So you can use Cloud Backup to restore to another environment. So what you would do, for argument's sake, is if you didn't have multiple tenants configured on day one, you would configure your additional tenant, your new tenant, your demo tenant, your UAT tenant, or if you bought or configured a new tenant on the day that you had a corruption, you would configure that into our Cloud Backup service so that it could see that tenant and have access to it, and then you will be able to restore between them. If, for argument's sake, you already had multiple tenants set up and one of them was corrupted, you could restore to the others, no problem whatsoever. In place and out of place hold is in place and out of place restore is across tenants. Yes. Is there a traffic limit from Microsoft on a tenant? How does all this data traffic affect performance? That's a good question. Thanks very much for that. So. The best way to answer that is twofold. Firstly, our Azure data centers are the same data centers as Office 365. So when it comes to backing up content between Office 365 using Cloud Backup, we have very limited latency, if any. We have the ability to
backup content from Office 365, and often we're not traversing any major networks. If anything, as an example, if you chose a different data center location from your primary data center, so essentially what DAA have done, which is choose a different data center from where their primary data is being held, their live data, then you'll be traversing the Microsoft backbone in order to get that backup data into Cloud Backup. So very nominal latency, very nominal amounts of data traveling across the network in terms of throttling or limitations. It's also important for me to point out that AvePoint have an extremely good relationship with Microsoft. We are their #1 ISV globally. So they know us, they know our data centers, they know our IP addresses, they know how we're connecting to their environment, and we ensure that we connect with their preferred tooling. So sometimes a graph API, sometimes different API structures, in order to be able to limit any of their concerns. And therefore, we very rarely, if ever, get throttled specifically for backup. But we use migration products with Office 365 quite regularly, and we don't get throttled there either. So I hope that answered your question. Please feel free to add some additional questions if you didn't get an answer there. Teams data is mainly SharePoint, but Teams conversations backed up. Can we able to restore to a team? Yes. So can we restore Teams conversations? So yes, there is a very good point there. Teams is multiple storage locations. So if you're having a one-on-one conversation and you send a file, that data is in your OneDrive. If you have a broad team, so a group team, and you share files, that data is stored in the SharePoint site for that team. And if you're having conversation in that team, that is stored in an Exchange mailbox. We back up the entirety of Teams, so we back up all of that environment, and we can restore all of the conversations. The only difference is due to an API limitation with Teams itself, we cannot restore them as the structure looks in Teams. So we can't push directly into Teams as it looks now. So what happens is we restore that data as an HTML file. So when you go into a restored team and you go into conversations, the first line says there is a existing conversation here. Please click on the history. You click on the hyperlink and it takes you to a file within the file section of that team, which is an HTML, and then you get a full fat format of the previous conversation that was in the team originally. We are working with Microsoft to make that functionality full-fledged, so we can push directly back into Teams, which is it's an API limitation at the moment. But to give you some confidence about how we're working with Microsoft, we recently announced that we can restore Slack conversations directly into Teams full fidelity. So we are working with their API structures to be able to push data into Teams. We're not just there yet perfectly, but no one else can do that right now. But we do restore an HTML file where you can get the full conversation history with all of the fonts and emojis and so forth. I hope that answered your question. And there's a question about a license model, and I'm gonna pause on that question, or maybe just point this particular questioner to some of my colleagues. I will have one of our guys contact you with regard to the license model, because it's a very specific answer to that question. It depends on the number of users your business has, how much data you want to back up, what elements, and what your retention periods are, and whether you have a limitation. So if you've got like unlimited, or you want to go for a more limited scope amount of data. So there's a very broad answer to that question with a lot of different variants. So I'm not going to answer that question on here, but I am going to point you, so the person who asked that question, I'm going to point someone directly at you to give you a more broad answer, sorry, a more direct answer based on some specific questions. They'll ask you some questions about what your environment looks like, and then you'll get a very specific answer. Just waiting to see if there are any other questions. If anyone has any questions for Kevin, I'm gonna prompt them to answer your questions now. But yep, just wait for a couple more. Okay, here's a new question. Okay, that's a good question. So we're a public sector body. We're having problems convincing our senior leadership team that we should be looking at backup solution for migration, before migration, sorry, especially when it comes to trying to explain the differences between Office 365 and third-party backup. Are there any pointers or advice you could offer? So Kevin, I'm gonna just see if you have any opinions on this question. So public sector body, they were trying to convince their senior leadership team that they should be looking at a backup solution, ideally before they migrate to Office 365. I'm gonna answer that question. I'm gonna give you a couple of seconds to have a little think about it. But do you have any advice for this person in terms of how you convinced your senior leadership team, or if you were migrating to Office 365? Let me just answer it from my perspective before you say anything, Kevin.
Okay.
I hopefully answered some of these elements in the presentation. There are some primary differences between Office 365. I covered that with the why backup Office 365 at the beginning of the presentation, but specifically what you get in Office 365 is a retention and hold. That is not backup and restore. It has some differentials, specifically when you're trying to get data back to the end user. So you may have a copy of every email that that user ever sent, but if you need a specific folder from that user from 90 days ago, that's challenging. Yes, you have e-discovery, so you can absolutely get access to the data, but the way that that data is served up to the end user specifically can cause some challenges. That's even more the case when they've come from an environment where they had a specific way of working when it came to backup and restore. I've lost my folder, I raise a ticket, the ticket gets worked on by the infrastructure team, by the exchange team, by the email team, by whomever. It gets worked on and they email me back and say, here's a PST with your folder or with your emails that are missing, or that data is now back in your mailbox. That is a very different experience to here's your e-discovery logon and you need to search for that data. So the experience is very different from a supportability standpoint and from a service delivery standpoint. What is the end user experience? So hopefully I spoke to some of those very specific questions that you're asking in terms of what's the differential. In terms of the time frame, in my opinion, and this comes from me being a customer before I was ever working with any products in Office 365 from a vendor standpoint, in my humble opinion, the best time you could possibly be looking at cloud backup is before you've done a migration. You need to get the environment configured, understand what your retention policies are, understand the tool and how you're going to use it, understand how your service desk are going to use it, make sure that they have the relevant access rights, and do all of that. If you can do all of that without having live data in your environment, that is a great place to be in reality. The moment you put one mailbox in Office 365, you have now risk. If the end user says that they can't access a file or can't delete or have lost a file or deleted a file, you now have an element of risk. So actually, in my opinion, the fact that you haven't migrated to Office 365, which is how I interpret this question, and you're trying to convince your senior leadership team that they need to look at a backup solution, today is the best time to look at that, not when you've got a load of your users in there. You want to be proactive about Office 365 and cloud backup rather than reactive. And the reactive scenario is the horrible one where an end user who's a very senior person in your business loses some data and you can't get it back for them. And is there a way that you could potentially lose data and not get it back? Yes, and I absolutely provided some of those slides again at the beginning in the why backup Office 365. There are scenarios whereby you can lose data in Office 365. Accidental deletion being the primary example of that. So that's my opinion. Kevin, if you've got any additional advice for this particular person, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah. So in my view, that the message needs to be very clear and very true to life. So you need to compare the native functionality to a third-party backup solution. Dan has some great slides on that we walked through already, so you should use that content. But once you have that content, you need to say, well, what if? So let's make it real. So as Dan said, senior, like a director in your company, for example, loses a file, a very, very important file, and it passes the native capability restoration for Office 365. What happens if you didn't have that? So the file is gone is the scenario. So what's the impact of the business? We talk about the granular restoration. That's also very similar. A powerful one is ransomware, so that can be catastrophic for a business. So what happens if a ransomware attack in Office 365 native capability will allow you have minimal recovery? A third-party backup solution like AvePoint will give you full recovery. That's a very, very strong message. And Dan also pointed to legal. So legal, obviously, companies are concerned about legal cases and so on. We need to have the ability to restore our data if and when a legal case arises. Again, compare if in Office 365 this data would be unavailable. With third party, it's available. So very, very clear. Wouldn't go into too much detail, but just give real life examples. Senior staff being impacted, legal requirements, and ransomware. So I think those three buckets, in my view, would probably help your case.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Kevin. And yeah, I really do agree with those statements. I definitely think it's a good reason or a good way to kind of get the business to understand the risk that they have potentially. I'll just wait a couple more sessions for any more questions, and then I think we can potentially close up here. Let me just make sure I've answered all the questions before I accidentally ignore someone. Yes, I've answered that one. Yes. Aha, yes, here's another question. Can you set the backup retention for a specific period, like 1 year, so that all the data older than that period is removed from the backup? Yes, you absolutely can. So the entire way that we have cloud backup is we have unlimited retention, which means an unlimited amount of data for an unlimited amount of time if you so wish. But you can specifically decide how long you want the retention periods to be. So you can pick an arbitrary number, 1 year, 3 years, 7 years, whatever your legal requirement is. You can absolutely do that. We also have the benefit, which I think is really good, of being able to do that by workload. So if you want to keep SharePoint data for 7 years, but you're only required to keep Exchange data for 3 years, you can set retention based on workload as well. So you can choose which specific workload you want to set for what specific retention period, any data that extends past that. So if you set it for 1 year, for example, on day 366, that particular piece of data will be removed. So yes, you can set backup retention for a specific period, and any data older than that period will be removed from the backup. So thank you very much for that question, and I hope I answered it. Yes and yes is the answer. And I think that is all of the questions that we have. Yes, okay. So I would like to thank Kevin from DAA for really helping out with this webinar and being a really useful partner for me to discuss this. I think it's really helpful for people to understand not how it works just from a vendor standpoint and from a product standpoint, but real life scenarios from a business that, as you guys can tell, is extremely well placed to understand the differences. They work in an industry that is regulated and has a lot of different amounts of data. So thank you very much, Kevin, for your time today and for your wisdom. I really appreciate it. If anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to pass them over to me. We will be sending out these slides. So if you've registered your information, please make sure that you confirm that your email addresses are correct, or re-register if you need to, and you'll make sure that that information gets passed over to you. And thank you very much for everyone who's attended. We appreciate your time.